Peter Firstbrook, your book is called The Obamas, The Untold Story of an African Family. Now, when we think about Obama, we think of a multicultural man, someone of mixed race heritage, equally descended from a white mother and an African father. In some senses, we might expect your book to be called The Untold Story of an American Family, but it's in The Untold Story of an African Family. Why did you choose to focus on this side of the family heritage, and what is its significance?
Well, when the American people elect a president, they also elect the leader of the free world. You only have to see what's happening this week in Cairo to know that the decisions made now in the White House are going to affect the lives of 85 million Egyptians. And so I sometimes think that the American people don't fully appreciate just how big a deal it is when there's a new American president, because he does have this very powerful, influential position over the rest of the world, not just the American people. And so that's the first thing, really, that he is an important man to everybody. But with Barack Obama, he is fundamentally different from any previous American president for very obvious reasons. He came up very quickly from relative obscurity, and Napoleon once said, "Give me lucky generals." I think the Democratic Party are glad they had a lucky candidate, because he did come up from nowhere. He had a lot of luck. He made it to the White House, and he is mixed race. He's half black, half white, and that made him very different.
I think one of the things that seems very powerful and interesting about Obama is that there's something about him that is offshore, and by that I mean off the shores of America. When you look at previous presidents, Reagan, Carter, Clinton, they are a recognizable American type. You may approve or disapprove, but you can recognize them right away.
Absolutely.
Obama's maternal side, his mom, grew up in Kansas, then moved later to Seattle, then to Hawaii. Even she comes out of a somewhat bohemian American background, but you focus on his father's side and you trace it pretty far back. I mean, if I can I just want to read the names of some of the ancestors here. Hussein Onyango Obama, that's the grandfather.
That's the grandfather.
And then Opio, Obongo, Ochugo, Ogola, Onyango, Okiwiri, and Ogello. You're going back to 1624. Why this ancient history?
Well, what's interesting there from what you said, that you might have noticed that all the names there began with O, and actually the Luo tribe, that's the tribe from which the Obama family are from, they name all their males with the letter O, starting with O, and all the women have a name starting with A. And it's because really that when Obama was elected, or even when he was a candidate in the campaign, there were acres of newsprint written about him. There were books, there were magazines, there were newspaper articles, there were TV programs, but they all concentrated on his life in America. And there's another whole half to Obama that I felt was really not being addressed, and that was his Kenyan side. And so when he was elected president in November, I decided that actually it'd be rather interesting to go out to Kenya to research and explore the background. And I actually intended to make a documentary film, that was my original idea, on the way in which his village, Kogelo, or rather his ancestral village, Kogelo, was going to change in the next 12 months, because it had been the focus of news attention. I thought there was going to be an interesting thing there. But in fact, having done research around Kogelo and being redirected to Kendu Bay, which is where the majority of the Obamas were from, I realized actually that wasn't really the story to tell. The story was a remarkable transformation of a family. Go back 2 generations to Onyango Obama. He was born in 1895. He was essentially born into an Iron Age family.
Just to clarify, Onyango Obama is the father of Barack Obama Sr., so
that's
it's actually the president's grandfather.
It's the president's paternal grandfather, Onyango. And he's a big figure in the story, as you might imagine. He was born, as I say, in 1895. He was brought up in a society that hadn't had any contact with white people, that didn't have the wheel. They lived in mud huts with the thatched roof, and they wore animal skins. And in 2 generations, you've gone from this man in 1895, Onyango, to the leader of the free world living in the White House. And that is a remarkable transformation to happen.
I think it's interesting how in the American political debate these things get sanitized. So Obama, for example, often will refer to his granny, which is
Yes.
Sarah Obama. And people don't point out that Sarah Obama is not his grandmother. It's one of his grandfather's other wives.
Yes.
His actual grandfather is grandmother was someone else. So
Yes.
there's a very interesting and very tribal history. You mentioned the Luo tribe.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the major tribes in Kenya, and how did this affect the milieu in which the Obama family became, not only was raised, but became aware politically?
Well, the Luo originated in southern Sudan, and I'm going back now to around about the 1200s, so a long time ago. And as a tribe, they migrated south down the White Nile into northern Uganda, and then east into western Kenya. And they arrived in western Kenya, I suppose, around about the 1500s, much the same sort of time that Columbus sailed to the New World. And they established themselves around the eastern shore of Lake Victoria. And they developed their clear identity as an individual separate tribe. But of course they also displaced other tribes there, because there were other tribes that were living in that part of Africa before the Luo arrived. When the tribal groups started to really form themselves, you ended up with actually there were over 40 different tribes in Kenya, but the dominant tribes are the Kikuyu, which comprise about 25% of the nation, and the Luya, and then the Luo, who are about 12 or 13%. So the Luo are the third largest tribe, but actually they punch above their weight because they have a reputation for being very intelligent, which they put down to a high protein diet, eating fish. But they are primarily, they make most of the university professors and the doctors in Kenya. So they are a very influential group. But you also have the dominant tribe, which is the Kikuyu. And ever since independence, Kenya became independent from Britain in 1963. Ever since independence, there has been a power struggle between the Kikuyu and the Luo politically. And usually the Luo came off worse because the Kikuyu were the dominant tribe, they were bigger, and they had the very first president in Kenya was Jomo Kenyatta, who was a Kikuyu. And so there's always been this tension. Now, the most recent example of that was the terrible post-electoral violence that there was in Kenya in 2007, early 2008, where thousands of people died, and there are still hundreds of thousands of people displaced living in Red Cross tents in Kenya. So this tension, this struggle between the Luo and the Kenya and the Kikuyu still exists today.
Now, Obama's grandfather, Onyango,
Yes.
grew up under colonialism. Colonialism
Yes.
established in Kenya late in the 19th century, continuing
correct.
to 1963 when Kenya gets independence. He has a very interesting set of interactions with the British, which actually you helped me understand in your book. And you helped me understand a very shocking line in Obama's own book, Dreams from My Father, where he says the following. He's talking to Sarah Obama, and he says of his grandfather, "I had imagined him an independent man, a man of his people, opposed to white rule. What Granny had told us scrambled that image completely, causing ugly words to flash across my mind. Uncle Tom, collaborator, house nigger." So this is the President of the United States using the N-word to describe his own grandfather.
Yes.
What's going on here?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think you have to put Dreams from My Father in context. It was first published in 1995, and it was written when President Obama was, I guess, 33. Now, certainly, if I'd written a memoir when I was 33, there'd be certain things that I'd regretted writing now, and I suspect it might be true for you as well. And so, what he wrote then may not necessarily be what he believes now.
Although conversely, when you're a political man, you may wish you didn't say it, but you might have actually meant it.
I don't know of any major political figure who's actually had the audacity to write a memoir at that age and then have to live with it. And I think actually it's to Barack Obama's credit that he's actually gone public, as it were, at a very young age and has had to live with this.
And this book was a kind of campaign document for him, distributed, and I mean, it was widely discussed during the in 84, and I mean 2004 when he gave the Democratic Convention speech.
I think Audacity of Hope was probably a clearer campaign document than
that's very true.
And in 1995, when President Obama wrote that, I'm not sure he had the sort of political ambitions that he had later on.